or you don't want the chats and things like that to be visible, we ask that you kindly drop out of the session now. We'd like to acknowledge our partners in delivering this program. So we've got Royal Life Saving Society Australia, Commercial Aquatics Australia, OTM Sport and Leisure Planning Group, YMCA Victoria, the Victoria State Government Health and Human Services Department, Belgravia Leisure, Belgravia Kids as well, we should add, Cleaning Melbourne, VACA, Aligned Leisure, Water and Water Partners, EcoSave, and Western Leisure Services. This session today is a CEO interview with Mark Collins, as I mentioned, the CEO of Belgravia Kids. Our upcoming sessions next Thursday, we've got Industry Recovery Strategies with Justin Scar, the CEO of Royal Life Saving Society Australia. The following week, we have Bruce Mackay, who's a consultant at ODM Planning. Bruce set up Peninsula Aquatic and Recreation Centre, as well as Western Leisure Services, so that LGE operating model. So he's got quite a bit of experience in starting from scratch, and so he's got a unique presentation on what's involved in starting up our leisure centres after the crisis is over. The following Thursday, we've got Jeremy Krigg from EcoSave, and he's going to talk about how you can leverage, one, the closure period now, but also when you're thinking about starting back up. They have a energy performance guarantee, which is essentially how you can save potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars at your leisure centre. And have it all guaranteed. I've worked with EcoSave in the past, as have a number of our clients, and we can't sort of speak highly enough for that sustainable responsibility, as well as just making efficiencies where they're available. There's some very low-hanging fruit there. We've got Craig Roberts the following week, which is the National Aquatic Industry Workforce Profile, which is a big research project that RLSSA have done over the last couple of years. So he'll present that as well. So without further ado, Mark Collins, I'll give a bit of background. So Mark has well over 17 years experience in the leisure recreation facility management industry. He's got degrees in sports management. He's got an MBA. He's got a passion for continuous improvement and a really impressive background in the industry. So he was 9 years at the City of Yarra as a centre manager at both Collingwood Leisure Centre and Fitzroy Swimming Pool. 8 years at Glen Ira City Council, overseeing the leisure and recreation branch, and did the Greenfield startup for GSAC. Mark is the chairman of the Australian Leisure Facilities Association, AFAR, and CEO of Belgravia Kids. So, Mark, can I just check that you're here, you can hear us, and do you want to just sort of say hello to everyone before we jump into any questions?
Yeah, I'm here. So thanks, RJ, for inviting me along, and thanks everyone for joining us. I don't think there's ever been a time in my lifetime where I think leadership's been as important as it is now, and that's at work, but also at home and with your family and friends.
Thanks, Mark. We're hearing you loud and clear here. So we've got lots of comments coming in just before we get started. So we've got Belgravia Leisure Centre, Kurikuri Aquatic in New South Wales. We've got some theme park operators, Gumbaya World. We've got City of Geelong. We've got Aqualink, which I believe is Nunawading or Box Hill. We've got someone from Fisheries and School Camps. We've got Nillumbik Centre Manager, Jump Swim Schools from Geelong West. We've got the Swim Project. So we've got quite a few quite a diverse stakeholder group there. Monash Sport, Trent Crockett, good to see you, Trent. It's been a while. Here we go, Active Monash, Yarra Leisure. So quite a few people there. Mark, probably some familiar organizations to yourself. So if anyone's having trouble with the comment section, we have had a little bit of feedback over the last couple of days that some people can't access the comment section. If you send an email to assessments@lsv.com.au, and I'll just show what that email looks like here. So assessments@lsv.com.au. I'll be monitoring that inbox and can answer those or field those questions at the end of the session. Without further ado, Mark, we here at LSV, and I'm sure many throughout the industry, have been following Belgravia Kids' acquisition of Jump. And it seems the overall impression is that your personal efforts and your organization's efforts are very lauded and very highly regarded in the space. So for those not familiar with the story, in a nutshell, what's the executive summary of the Jump acquisition by Belgravia Kids?
Yeah, thanks, RJ. for those, look, I think most of the people on the call will probably be familiar with Jump Swim Schools, but just to give you kind of a quick overview, they were a chain of swim schools that they opened their first facility, the original founder, in Grafton in 2010. And I think the thing that was different about this model compared to what has previously been kind of the norm in the industry was it was very much a boutique class size model. So Jump operate with no more than 2 lessons at a time. It's effectively a domestic pool that's been placed into, at that stage was probably more like industrial property, but they did move to sort of retail types of property given the size. And the reason why they did grow so quickly, which they grew to almost 70 swim schools by early last year, and that was based on really a very low capital cost involved as compared to traditional models of either private sort of swim schools that, you know, might have a 25-metre pool, at least a couple of $1 million to set up as a private operator, or if you're looking at, you know, leisure facilities that tens of millions of dollars to operate some type of similar type of facility. So, and the other thing that they had going for them was a very low operating cost structure. So if you've got a very limited amount of staff that are there, and franchisees, it was a franchisee model, so they were able to get capital in for a range of different, with low capital costs, so they were able to grow really quickly. Unfortunately, they went into voluntary administration in May 2019. That was probably more so around trying to restructure the business at that time, which meant that they were seeking to do a deed of company arrangement at that time to restructure some of their entities that held the franchise agreement. So they had the intention of, a bit like what's happening with Virgin Australia at the moment, that they have every intention to keep operating the business. At that stage, it was put on the market, but effectively the current owner had put a plan in place, and that was probably the way it was going until such time as the ACCC become involved. And the thing that probably came out at that time was that there's a number of issues that were going on with the business. They owed over $15 million to creditors. Most of this was amongst its own entities, and that was probably one of the things of going through this process, was that they had a very complex corporate structure. They had a lot of entities that were all doing different things, and they were offering services through the place. But effectively, the real big problem that was happening was that it was somewhat a Ponzi scheme, in that the operations were being financed by the upfront franchise fees, because it was a turnkey model that effectively people paid their money up front and they were handed an operating swim school at the end. The issue had been that there was more and more evidence that was coming through from disgruntled franchisees who had given money and was taking 2 years plus at that stage to even get a swim school out of the ground. And they were continually selling, collecting fees, and nothing was happening. And effectively what was happening was that money was being taken back to run the operations of the venue. And eventually it got to a point where they just couldn't keep selling more franchises. It got to a point where there was obviously enough people beating their drums. It had a lot of media exposure at the time. And the ACCC became aware of it, that people, effectively mum and dad investors were being ripped off. And at such time, that was where they'd made a decision to try and remove themselves from the obligations that they had and start something. But yeah, once the ACCC became involved, then we were able to make a bid for it and go from there. But yeah, there was really a lot of issues that were happening even throughout that time. We had franchise agreements being not consistent. Some terrible compliance issues, fit out quality. We had issues with intellectual property being housed in other entities. Still had to deal with an owner that probably wasn't really, they were probably, I'd say, hostile to us becoming involved. We had lots of liquidators that we had to deal with. So because of the corporate structure, the franchise agreements were held in various entities. So to get the group all back together meant that we had to deal with different liquidators to do that. Lots of head leases held and having to deal with landlord assignments throughout the process. There's been lots of brand damage initially with media exposure. And probably the biggest thing was just the loss of trust that the franchisees had experienced all through the operating ones, as well as the ones that had lost their money. So it was a really difficult time. We purchased the first group of centres in July and the second group in September. But yeah, that's probably Jump in a nutshell at the moment.
It sounds like just a total quagmire. It sounds like you're sort of wading through the muck here, and that's partly why we thought there'd just be such tremendous value in your insights, having just gone through this, over the last sort of 24 months, and then being able to, glean some insights into what everyone's sort of facing now. But it almost sounds like, a lot of organizations would have gone not too hard basket, but it sounds like you guys, sort of grabbed the bull by the horns and went for it. So I'm told that you traveled the country with Jeff Lord, who's the chairman of the Belgravia Group of Companies, for anyone not familiar, that you guys traveled the country to speak to franchise owners. So what did that involve, and what prompted that decision?
Well, I think in a situation like this was that we really, because of the current situation, like we understood that the fundamentals of the business were sound underneath. It had just been managed badly, which had caused the situation. So really it was about how you respond in that period of time when there was a lot of franchisees had a lot of uncertainty about where their business was, and that they were getting no communication from their head office about what was happening. So really it was about trying to start rebuilding the trust that had been lost by the franchisees in their franchisor at that time, and really establishing about who Belgravia were, give them the chance for us to answer questions as best as we possibly could. We didn't have all the answers. It was effectively, as soon as we found out, we coordinated communications that the liquidator put out the current situation, that the business, that the franchisee agreements had been assigned to us, and that we coordinated our communications at the same time to let them know about who we are, and that we would like to run some information sessions in each of the states, because we operated out of 4 different states for Jump. So effectively we organised to visit 4 states in 2 days with myself and Jeff, to get out and to get in front of people as soon as possible. And almost all the franchisees turned up. They'd been dealing with this situation for a number of months up to that, and they were very anxious about the whole situation. So we got in front of them, and we did our best to try and put people at ease, and really wanted to listen to people. Let them vent. There's some angry people in those rooms. There's some really emotional people in those rooms. But it was the best start we could possibly give, to at least know that people were here and were serious about what we were there. And then really the first month really looked like it was a follow-up then too. I went and met with every single franchisee across the country individually in that first month for the first 40 that we had. And then when we bought our next lot, I did the same thing. So it was a significant amount of effort to sit down and spend, really it was probably an hour and a half of going through and really understanding what the situation was with people's businesses, what were the common themes that all people were experiencing within the network, and really I pulled all those common themes together, and that really created a bit of a mini strategic plan about what we needed to do from Belgravia's group to try and fix some of the issues that were in the place, and to get things back on even keel and to understand the business better, because that was probably the difficult thing. Was we took over a business and we really, it was a leap of faith, I'll be honest about that. We had some information around the financials. We'd done a little bit of due diligence, but we had to really understand this business, and that was a key plank of doing that.
It sounds I've just been sort of taking notes as you've been replying there. So the next question I had was, what kind of tips would you give other leaders and or organizations on how to navigate complexity successfully? And I've just sort of summarized some of your points already, which is you got in front of people straight away. You invested in one-on-one time. You established common themes and used that to inform a strategic plan. And you use that whole process to really understand the business. Do you have other sort of tips and tricks of the trade as such for navigating complexity?
I think probably one thing for me was that this is certainly the first time I'd gone through a process like this. And I think when you're going through complex areas that you haven't dealt with before, you need people around you that are experts in their area to assist you. I certainly had Jeff. Jeff's been someone who had a long corporate career before he went into Belgravia Group and had dealt with, and even with Belgravia, had dealt with distressed assets and going through liquidation or voluntary administration processes. So A, he was a good resource. But B was we used a corporate lawyer, Minter Ellison, in the Gold Coast, who had dealt with Jump in the past and had been their legal representation, and they were invaluable to me to be able to. They were franchise law experts. They had knowledge of the Jump group. So just navigating some of the legal complexities of it, they were fundamental of trying to, and I still speak to them, probably a couple of times a week. I've got big legal bills, but it's been definitely worth it to go through this process because it is really complex. And the other part is the liquidators, because, there was 3 different liquidators that we had to deal with. And I certainly had to gather their help at different times about trying to force the owner of the company to be able to bend to our will a little bit about getting some of the things that we needed to get done, having those relationships and to help deal with some of the problems in the group as well. That was certainly a key part of it. I think also utilising the knowledge and expertise in the group as well. So we ended up recruiting a key employee there that's been really invaluable to me as well in terms of understanding the previous business and the way things were done, and having access to records and things that we may not have had otherwise. And also leveraging some of the people, the goodwill within the group, of that there were already leaders within that franchisee group who wanted to assist, and being able to give them a voice. And I think that was one of the issues that they had around there about nominating some leaders within that group to help assist us and to give us a better understanding of the business. They were probably key decisions as well that helped kind of smooth this process as best we could.
I think I think you've really given us quite a valuable insight into what those complexities were. I mean, obviously from the sidelines, you can read an article or you can sort of speak to people involved, in passing at various events and things like that. But just to hear the level of complexity, the types of experts that you needed around you, it certainly sounds like it was a huge undertaking. And hats off to you guys for what you've done and been able to achieve. If you were to sort of apply those learnings and you were thinking about the industry more broadly, what types of things do you think leaders of organizations should be doing now, applying it to recovery efforts after this COVID-19 state of emergency passes?
I think clear and regular communication is critical in this time. When there's a lot of uncertainty, when people are anxious about various situation, is being able to communicate. And you may not always have the answers, but I think that there's been plenty of things that we've done at Belgravia during this time, just in terms of holding comms, because it seemed like every time there would be information put out by the government, people, wanted to get understanding, but, we're in the same boat. We're trying to understand something that was moving very quickly. But just acknowledging people that, we're on this, we're going to get some information and we'll come back to you. I think that definitely has played well, and to do it through multiple channels about those communications, because various people are on various platforms about how how comfortable they are with those. So just being able to kind of keep reiterating messages out to people. They may not, like with what's happening, or they might not be happy with you, but I feel like people always want to be led in these times. So that's really critical, and to really demonstrate that you are on top of things and that you are leading. I think you need to listen to the experts. As I said, we're not experts in the health field and everything that's going on, and we have to work within the guidelines that the Department of Health has been generally pretty good at being able to keep up to date. There's definitely been grey areas through this that we've had to try and work our way through, but that's really a consequence of everything moving so quickly at the start. I think it's going to be something that's going to be a little bit more staged coming out of this. So we're going to be able to fill some of those grey areas that come up much better than what we did going into it. And I think empathy has definitely been a key skill, I think, in terms of leadership. I think people react in all sorts of different ways when they're, fundamentally their security's threatened about, are they going to be able to put food on the table? Are they going to have a roof over their head? So that causes issues, and you have to understand that with people. So I think that's really a key part of, what I've learned out of the jumpers is definitely having empathy with people, and they were definitely in the same boat as, what many people are in there. And I think the other one too that when I think about this is that was a quote I heard the guy from the what's called World Health Organization talking about him dealing with pandemics in the past, but I thought it was a really good quote about, when you're in crisis, is that speed beats perfection every time. And that's the type of environment that we're in, and that we've been moving so fast. And that was certainly going through jumpers, that it was about speed of reacting really quickly to things. And, maybe it wasn't to the perfect standard that you wanted to, but it was about, reacting really quickly to an environment. And I think that's what people have really had to do in this pandemic, to pivot their businesses quickly so that they can survive.
Yeah, that one's come up as a really common theme. This speed beats perfection. Our COO has been sort of saying it at every opportunity to all of us business unit managers. And Nick Cox said last week. He said it's not the biggest fish that survives; it's the fastest fish. So if you can't catch the meal, then you don't survive. So that was another sort of take on that, and obviously the other sort of take is done is better than perfect, right? So there's a lot of probably people, particularly in times of crisis, that get sort of crippled with that anxiety and that indecision. So it sounds like a really common theme for leaders is you have to be decisive, and you have to make a call, and you can always sort of adjust. Well, maybe not always, but certainly adjust as you go. If you can, but it's great to hear. It's great to hear sort of that common theme emerging from your experience as well. So you've kind of answered the next one, which was maintaining relationships. You mentioned having clear and regular communication, including holding comms and using multiple channels. What are you guys doing right now at Belgravia Kids to ensure that when life goes back to normal, your customers, your stakeholders, your franchisees think of you as the most resilient, responsive, and highest value partner that they could possibly have?
Yeah, I think really, particularly with the franchisees, is that we've been in regular contact with them almost daily, particularly in the early stages of this when everything was moving so quickly. To just keep communicating, to keep checking in on them, because they were going through some really stressful times. So I think it's about unpicking some of the complexity for them, because they were very much small business owners, and they don't have big staff teams and the resources that a group like Belgravia has at its disposal. So I think we've really been able to demonstrate the value of being in a franchise system through this. So I think is just really trying to keep giving them the resources that they need to do this, give them some advice from legal and staffing perspective, giving them information about all the government programs that are out there that are available to them, and assist them through that process. Getting their business to get them and keep pushing on them in terms of the information we have on it, on their businesses, to put their businesses into hibernation. And once again, coming around to, you need to act quickly on that. And sometimes, people really need a push in that area. But as you said, like the fastest fish does survive. So that's been a real key understanding of it. I think the JobKeeper initiative has been terrific, and there's been a lot of work been going in terms of Belgravia. Even as late, this morning I just got off phone calls about chasing some final kind of employees or franchisees across the network, so that we can start pushing out payments from tomorrow on the JobKeeper program. So the real great part of it is it keeps people connected to their organisation, so that we know that there's going to be an end to this, and that we want to have businesses that can open up and can service customers straight away, and that they're not people that are stuck in Centrelink queues and that will go off and find other employment elsewhere because they have to. They know there's a job coming back to them here, and and there's a connection that's there. And then it's just, and then with your customers, it's really about us being continual in terms of our communications through social media and emails. We've got a home fitness network program that we've been able to pivot really quickly, that I'm really proud of the organisation about how we've been able to get something together in a few weeks' time that's allowed us to stay connected with our customers across all of our brands, which has been a really key part to our plans through this process as well.
Yeah. Okay. So so last night you and I spoke on the phone around sort of, I think it was about 10 to 6, and I saw this morning that at the same time Dan Andrews just posted literally at 10 to 6 last night about what the impact, the sort of financial economic impact is going to be. He was talking about Victoria, but probably could be extended nationally. And it was something about 11% of workers may be out of work, 14% decrease in sort of GDP, and that they had a range of sort of stimulus ideas that they were looking at, and I'm sure the federal government is as well. How do you think that kind of outlook? What does that look like for the learn to swim industry, do you think?
Oh, well, that's the $1 million question. Everyone's wanting to know, and to what that effect is. And I think that you can always look to the past to try and work out these things as best as you possibly can. The real problem is that the only kind of relevant event that was in, not even in our lifetime, was the Spanish flu, and that was 100 years ago, and society is fundamentally a lot different. There was no learn to swim businesses back then, so it's really it is a big unknown. I'm optimistic for learn to swim. I think it's definitely a required skill. I feel like parents will often sacrifice activities for themselves to make sure that their children are able to not miss out on things. Children are also a very low risk demographic with COVID-19. I think there's going to be some real downward pressure on rent with landlords and how that works ongoing, because there's going to be a lot of businesses that do go bust, and landlords are going to have to come to the table in terms of what that looks like in terms of ongoing costs for businesses, including learn to swim. And I think there's going to be some real opportunities that come out of there are the sad fact of it is that there are going to be businesses that don't make it through. So there's going to be some opportunities that come up with distressed businesses that will, that were perfectly viable businesses, but they just haven't been able to make it through. So I'm optimistic on that front, but there are some real challenges. I definitely think discretionary spending's going to be down. It's going to effectively take a vaccine to fully restore confidence in people going to public area businesses. And there's no guarantee that a vaccine will ever become available. And I think that's the real messaging that I'm getting about reading things, is that there's definitely going to be a real effort to make this happen. And I think history, if there's one thing history shows us, is that we can back the human race. I think when the chips are down, I think that's when the human race is at its best. And I think, there's a real push to obviously get a vaccine for this. But people have to understand that I think when, particularly older adults, that they may have to live with social distancing for a really long time. And I think everyone will probably until a vaccine really comes into place. I think hygiene practices will be a major focus of businesses coming back on board, getting really secure supplies to sanitizer and just how we clean our facilities and the perception from the community around it. I think that's here permanently. And I think people are going to live a much simpler life than before. People are going to cut out a lot of the stuff that, maybe they just didn't do. That, we're slowing down our life, and I think people are going to get used to that in some respects. And do they need all of the activities that maybe kids were doing after school? They might have to make some value calls on the money that they have available in their budgets, but also about, do we need to do all these activities every single night of the week? Like, do kids need a little bit more time and enjoy the simpler life a little bit more, much like maybe we had as kids and other generations in the past. So there's pros and cons about, which way it's going, but at the end of the day, we're going to live through it as to how society responds to this.
Yeah, there's some really useful insights there. I've been taking more notes there, Mark, but yeah, it's some interesting questions around social distancing and living a simpler life. I know a lot of people are cooking more so than they ever have in the past, and that's for better or for worse. We've got a lot of snacking going on and things like that, and we're not burning our passive calories, and we're putting more calories in, but it's nice to take time to enjoy things like cooking and being more sort of present in the moment, and I think that there will be some good outcomes there, and obviously there's a lot of negative outcomes too, and there's probably a lot of people who can't cook right now who are really living a miserable life if they never took the time to learn how to cook. So what do you think? What do you think you kind of answered the shape of recovery a little bit for certainly for your industry, and what do you think the silver linings are? Not so much for individuals and families, which you've touched on, but do you think there are silver linings for organizations as well?
I think particularly for my business, I think the real silver lining that's going to come out of this is the relationship with my franchisees. I think when we took over and some of the challenges that I'd sort of outlined is that that trust, I think that's the number one thing and that was through no fault of our own, but we have to live with the consequences of the previous franchisor, and how we've responded and how quickly we've responded and how much effort and time that we've gone to make sure that all of these franchisees can survive this period, is that I know that they know that we really care about the business. It's not just a business transaction that occurred. Certainly, we're running a business and we're doing it for profit, but at the end of the day, I care about all these people. I've gone and sat with every single one of them. I've heard their stories. So I think they know that now. I think that's been the real silver lining that I understand. And it's when you're going through this and you're getting emails or phone calls from people just telling you they really appreciate your efforts, I think that's the thing that I know that when we get out the other side, we're going to be very much stronger for it. And I think the other one is it really is a battle it's survival of the fittest at the moment. And I think that's good for any business to go through. And if you survive the crisis, it definitely creates opportunities that are out there if you can get to the other side. And that's what I'm really hopeful of getting out to the other side and being able to build our business again.
Yeah, that's definitely been a theme in both your approach to the jump acquisition and now is really valuing and investing in relationships, and I think it's obviously paid off for you guys in a really positive way, and it's probably something that everyone can reflect on and think about how they can apply to their team or their organization or their business. Do you think there are sort of blue sky opportunities as well? Like what kind of blue sky thinking are you looking at the moment, or you think others should be looking at? What are the types of things that people should be looking to as significant pie in the sky type thinking?
I think the old saying is don't waste a crisis. And I think that's the thing that I've probably switched my mind to now that we're kind of through the reactive stage is how do we imagine the business going forward from here? So I think it's, in terms of like sort of from what people should be thinking about, I think, well, what's the structure of your business and how do you make yourself leaner and take the opportunity to respond to changes? We were already kind of going through a process at Belgravia about, like all the systems that we use. So how do we, there's definitely some cost savings to be made across the organisation. And that's been a key. And I think that's going to really fast forward that project for us. I think rethinking our customer experience is definitely one, and I think that's to be taking into account with social distancing. That's really going to be your experience that your customer has across any business going forward. So it's the perception that the customer will have that your business is safe and clean and hygienic going forward, and how do we build that in? Because I think that's going to be with us for quite some time. I think online value delivery platforms aren't going to go away after this. It isn't going to be a case of, we've put something together and then all of a sudden we'll open our business again. I think fundamentally all businesses are going to need to embrace the online component, and whether or not, we've definitely got bricks and mortar businesses that require people. You can't, learn to swim effectively online alone or some of these activities, but it can definitely be a value add. And how do you monetize that? That's definitely within our mind, and we've sort of started down that track with Belgravia's online fitness business. And I know every business has been different. Ours has been something that is a monetary point of view. Others have just done it as a value add. I mean, that's the decision that every business will make, but I think that's the fact that online, it's just not going to go away. So you need to invest in it and build that over time, because that will be an expectation, and they'll be receiving that elsewhere from other businesses. I think negotiating, on my behalf, I know it's different for council type of facilities, but with their landlords and ongoing discussions around them, they're going to be a really key part of having fixed costs in businesses. Where can you keep minimising that as best as you possibly can? And rent's a major part of that, and that landscape is going to change fundamentally even after we open, because it's not going to be a V-shaped, all back to normal as soon as we open the doors again. It's going to take some time, and landlords are going to need to be able to work with tenants to go through this process to see businesses survive. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of vacant property around, which also resets the agenda of those that are there and are still operating businesses. And I think it's just about just really taking a ruler over your business about your expenses and also your income. About trying to make sure that you've got cash flow to kind of get through this period, but also take advantage of some opportunities coming out the other side that will no doubt present themselves.
Yeah, there's some really good points there, and it's you can extend that to everyone's personal lives as well. If they're looking at, if they're paying rent or something like that, looking at sort of renegotiating and I'm sure, you know, people can sort of look at renegotiating their interest rates and things like that as well over the period, because the market's just going to get flooded. I know my boss is listening and probably cringing. Andy just bought a new house recently. Sorry, Andy. I know there's probably some opportunities for people in that space. Mark, thank you so much for sort of answering our pre-prepared questions. I think it's been really valuable hearing from you, and you certainly have a lot of unique insights and some really valuable ones that can be applied to the current crisis and/or leadership in general. So thank you so much for your thoughts and a bit of an insight into your world and how you sort of make decisions and what you prioritize in navigating complexity in particular. So I just want to ask our listeners, if you want to drop a question into the chat, so it's just that show conversation button. Mark, are you happy to sort of field some questions from the listeners today?
Yeah, that's fine.
So everyone listening at home, feel free to drop a question in there. You can also send a question to assessments@lsv.com.au. I am monitoring that inbox as well. We haven't had any questions come through that inbox so far, but we've got lots of comments from people who have signed into the session. We've got Brimbank City Council, Aquazone, Warrnambool, Mentone Girls Grammar College. We've got Bega Valley Shire in New South Wales. Obviously Monash we spoke about. We've got City of Casey Council. We've got Latrobe Sport, which is I believe Latrobe Uni, the Sarah complex there. Western Leisure Services, Aquastyle Swim School. We've got Andrew at Lakes Entrance Aquadome. Welcome, Andrew, and we know that you guys have had a sort of a double whammy out there with the bushfire season and now into COVID-19. It's great to see you guys signed into the session, and certainly our thoughts have been with you over the summer and through this crisis as well. So I've got a question here from Liz. She says, "Hi, Mark, how do you see swimming lessons starting again, and in brackets gradually, i.e. lower ratios, temperature checks, staff precautions, change rooms, etc., not talking about additional cleaning?" So I think what Liz is asking about is, you know, how we might incorporate social distancing into swim lessons getting started back up.
Yeah, it's a good question, Liz. I think we've done some work. I think before we obviously got closed down on the 23rd of March, I think it was. But the restrictions that were on as sort of stage 2 before that, we'd certainly done work across all of our business units in terms of what social distancing would look like for the Learn to Swim businesses. So, you know, there was, in terms of swimming lessons, you know, outside of, you know, there's obviously some general hygiene thing about making hand sanitizers available, but then certainly around spectator distancing was one that was in place. I think distancing amongst the pool in terms of the lesson. So that may either be, depending on the size that you may have, that may involve potentially lower ratios. The difficult part is about ensuring profitability of classes. So there's a limit that every business is going to have to make a decision on around, you know, what that looks like. And fundamentally, Jump is a lower ratio type business than say traditionally a leisure centre business. So I think the guidance that, you know, it was definitely a grey area going in, because essentially it's very difficult to socially distance some of your classes that you may be running when teachers need to be within that 1.5 metre distance with children in their class. So I think, you know, we can certainly attempt to try and minimise that, but it's fundamentally for the classes to run, that's going to have to happen. But I think the thing that was encouraging was that the Office of Sport in New South Wales had put together some advice, essentially around community sport. It talked about swimming pools. It didn't speak specifically about Learn to Swim classes, but it talked about community sport, about how it was low risk, that they wanted people to engage in those activities, and that we could still run events where sport where people were to come within 1.5, because there's no way that you can play football or soccer or all of these sports without doing the same, without experiencing the same issues that Learn to Swim has. And that advice was that was able to be done. Really, the 1.5, I think, in terms of the health authorities, is that they don't want people sitting next to one another within less than 1.5 metres for a static period of time. And they'd sort of talked about, I've seen it being sort of 15 minutes. So Learn to Swim classes don't fit into that category. And I think that we'll be able to find a way out of this in terms of, making sure that we can run these types of activities ongoing. And then, other things, whether or not we go to temp checks, I'm not sure. That may be something that we have ongoing. That seems to be a number of businesses have been doing that. And I think we'll be certainly investigating what's involved to do that in the next sort of week or so. They're probably the ones just sort of off the top of my head anyway.
It's almost a forensic procedure, isn't it? In some ways, checking people's temperatures. So there's all these questions. I mean, Nick sort of touched on this too last week around, like the freedoms and rights that we've enjoyed. Freedom of movement. Even thinking about temperature checks. That normally something like that would be totally inappropriate, but now. This is changed. It's changed what it means to live in a society, to live in a community, and there's all sorts of challenges for sort of our Western democracy structure. But it's interesting that some of these things for safety may become necessary. And Nick talked about September 11th changing how we do airline travel. Now we're looking at this is so deep cutting. It's impacting every single business, every single industry around the world.
I think that's going to be a real rub point with customers when we come back as well, because we've had fundamentally been very free to do what we want. And I know that, people, the really pleasing thing about Australians, we've done the right thing, and that's led to some really good outcomes compared to overseas. But I know that, there's already been sort of hotspots about people, why can't I play golf, or all these things about how the government's impinging on their rights that people are upset about, and you can already see overseas, like in places like America, people protesting out the streets about their freedoms being impinged on. And I think there's definitely going to be somewhat of that being required across businesses ongoing. And I think it's about trying to the measures that you put in place, that they're fair and reasonable. They're consistent with the evidence that's there, and they're not sort of bureaucratic and just a little bit over the top, because I think that customers are going to be comparing you against other businesses, and people fundamentally don't like having their freedoms impinged on. So I think that's going to be a challenge with every business about how you treat and how you work with customers to explain what you're putting in with your business to make sure that it is safe. But that it's fair and reasonable for customers to be able to comply with it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think it's another theme. If we were to pick out another theme from your take on this, is that you've been sort of referencing, listening to the experts and using an evidence base to make your decisions. And you're sort of referencing, in the States, for anyone not familiar, the protesters out in the streets with their AK-47s and whatever else. This sort of rise of anti-intellectualism that we've seen over the last 10 years. Hopefully one of the silver linings is that this type of event helps push people back towards experts and back towards facts and science and what's validated. We've got another question from Jacqueline. So do you have any suggestions on how to best reposition your business for someone who's only been operating for a couple of years? So the Swim Project is a social enterprise aimed at empowering adults to swim. So Jacqueline, maybe I'm trying to unpick that question there. How do you best reposition your business if you've only been operating for 2 years, and looking at empowering adults to swim?
I think just looking at that question, I'm assuming it's around that it's an adults only swimming business more so than kids, and that, you know, that's a much smaller market than sort of a children's business. But I think that there's a niche in that, to be honest. You know, that's one of the things that we're looking at with Jump. That's traditionally they've always been a children's business, but there's only a certain Jump are much smaller, and effectively there is a cap for all franchisees about how many people they can run in their business, even if there is a bigger demand. So offering adult learn to swim classes is a way that we can be able to offer, because those people, adults, can come at a later time than what children can. So we're certainly looking at finalising curriculum for adult learn to swim classes to be able to offer that service within our business, because it adds more capacity for the franchisees to earn money that they wouldn't be able to earn elsewhere if they're full with their children's learn to swim lessons. So I definitely think it's something that's worth pursuing, because I think particularly Australia has really high immigration levels. I think that's going to be interesting about what they do going forward, because that has definitely been a major driver of growth for the economy in Australia over the past decade, and the real balancing act about, I think we're going to be seen as an absolute destination country, even more so after this, with our economy and the way we've handled this situation, and being very much seen as a safe country to start up businesses. So it's how the government's going to handle that situation, when it may very much be about, one of our strengths is that we're on island and we've been able to shut down travel early, which was a major source of the infection. And I can't see how international travel is going to be started back up again in any meaningful way for a very long time to come. So that's going to be the balancing act of immigration. But I think that market, there is very much all those people that have immigrated over the past few years, is that they haven't grown up in a culture of swimming. And I think I'd like to think that swimming will definitely continue to remain on the agenda even after all of this, as being something that people enjoy in this country, and a fundamental part of being an Australian. So there'll be very much, as those people keep coming through with their kids, is that they see value in learning themselves on Learn to Swim.
It's for anyone listening at home, my wife is a travel agent, so she's straight away for Flight Centre. They shut down 300 stores. We're looking at what's happening with Virgin right now. It's scary what's sort of happened to the travel industry. I think that's great, though, that there is an opportunity to look at new specializations as well, and niche markets. Jacqueline, we had a session last Friday with Jen Dugard from Fitness Australia, who talked about understanding your client avatar, exactly who your customer is and what their profile is, and then the value of specialization and getting that, that there is tremendous value in being a specialist, particularly if you have a smaller business. So definitely check out that recording. It's on our webpage, Jacqueline. Sounds like there's some great opportunities for Belgravia Kids and Jump to look at there as well, Mark. So we've got another question from one of my colleagues, Adrian, who's considering doing his MBA. I guess he's taking the opportunity to ask a CEO a question about that. He says, do you wish you completed your MBA sooner? And what advice do you have for any upcoming CEOs or persons wanting to become a CEO?
No worries. I'm glad I did my MBA. It was it's quite some time ago now that I did it, for a number of reasons. One was I'm glad I did it early before I had kids, because it would be challenging to juggle the study and be working full time and having children. So it was much easier to complete. But look, there's plenty of people that do go through it. I wouldn't steer off if you've got children and whatever to do it. It just will take you longer to do it. I guess that's probably the first lesson. But all of the MBA programs are they know that they've got to work around people. They're generally people that are in workplaces. I think the second thing I got out of it was being able to open up a network that you wouldn't necessarily have had otherwise, because these people are from all sorts of different backgrounds that you'll do it with. So it's not just people that are within, leisure or aquatics or activity-based industry. These people are all sorts of different industries. So it opens you up to those. And I think the third thing that I probably most got out of the MBA was I think sometimes we've got the ability to think about our industry as maybe not as sophisticated as other industries. And I think that there very much are some really, really good operators in our industry that who are just as smart, just as sophisticated about what they're doing. The requirements of an operator now are very complex compared to what they were even 10 years ago. And these businesses are starting to become very big businesses. So I think that gave me a lot of confidence about working with some other people and where they were at their own careers, and they were part of big corporates, but were facing some of the same challenges, or just seeing how you compare against some other people and what you're doing in your business compared to others. So I think they were probably the key learnings I had from my MBA. And I think it's just probably in terms of being a CEO or whatever. I think the really good thing about being in our industry is that if you're passionate about it, there's always opportunities that come out. I think that the industry is definitely one that's grown a lot over the last period of time, and I think it's just been about getting a breadth of different experiences across various different things. I've done lots of different things across my journey of my career, and they all shape you in some way. From the very, even just, I think back of just going back to parents and even just the growing up, like all of those things form the values that you will take into your career at a later stage. And you just, if you treat everything as a learning opportunity, good or bad, and if you open yourself up to opportunities or, network and talk with people, you never know where those things will take you. And that's probably the number one thing that I'd say about, I think it's good to try and map out some level of, how you're going to get to where you want to get to. But you also have to go with things. And the best thing you can do is just open yourself up to opportunities, because they will lead into various rabbit holes as to where you want to go to.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark, for your insights. And it was great to hear about even, thinking sort of about your own personal journey and study and things like that. So thank you so much. And Adrian's just given a thanks, Mark, thumbs up in the chat there. So we have unfortunately run out of time, everyone. Chelsea, I've just seen your question come through, and I might stay on afterwards just to happy to sort of interact. And I know that Mark's very, very busy and needs to get going. But thank you very much, Mark, for your time and for making yourself available to, there was about 90 people signed in there at about 10 minutes ago at its peak. So thank you so much for making yourself available to a whole range of people across the industry. And it's been great to hear from you. If anyone has any questions, feedback, or maybe a follow-up question, there's assessments@lsv.com.au. Thanks once again, Mark, for your time. And if everyone at the end of the session here, you just need to hang up the little phone icon, and or in about 5 minutes, I'll sort of end the session. So thanks once again, Mark. It's been great chatting to you and gleaming some insights from your experience.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks a lot, RJ. Thanks everyone for taking the time to listen.